for a little bit. Just means I can set it up now and we don't have to worry about it. How was your concert? Did you come away alive?
I did come away. Well, no, I'm dead.
Oh, dang.
That was really fun. It was kind of a surprise because I literally got the alert that said oh, Death Cab for Cutie on my phone, and I'm like, what does that mean? Wait, concert, and it's in 30 minutes, and it's an hour away by bus, so I got a lift, and it worked out. It worked out.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out in the end. But
I am too. I would have been sad to miss it, but I totally forgot it was happening. But it was a nice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hello, Mr. Pat.
Hello.
Hello.
There's a part early I didn't even realize when you kill the first major villain in Assassin's Creed Origins, it sends you on a big long, flashback mission.
Oh, for sure.
I didn't want to quit because I wasn't sure if I quit where it would put me when I started it again.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, we're going to set you at the start of this, and it's going to start real slow, and you're like, no.
Yep.
That sounds...
Had that.
Sounds all right, I guess. I don't know.
It only happens at the beginning, I think. I don't think it does that later on. It's probably podcast talk, but I don't... The second time in, the combat is super not clicking with me in that game. I don't know if it's because I'm coming off of playing God of War, which is some of the best third-person action combat maybe ever.
See, that's the thing.
but yeah, I don't know. Origins combat is very it feels like I can't ever. It feels like I just have to kill them before they swing their weapon enough times to kill me because there's nothing I can do defensively.
You know what? I think that since I've been playing Odyssey, I feel like I have similar thoughts. But again, it's partially because I'm comparing it to both God of War and Spider-Man. And I'm
right. Yeah.
Why aren't you Spider-Man or why aren't you God of War? And I'm like,
But I mean, sort of, I feel like at the same time, you're comparing it to God of War and Spider-Man, but those are also video games that you spend $60 on and that are big play products. So it's maybe not. I don't know if Assassin's Creed should get that much of a pass. Yeah, it's so I don't know. Maybe compared to God of War, because God of War is not also a big open world game with a billion things to do. But I mean, Spider-Man kind of is that. It's not to the scale of Assassin's Creed, but it's still an open world game. Then again, the combat, while it reached a point in their old systems of being, I think, pretty good and having a pretty good flow, combat has never really been the reason to play Assassin's Creed. So
no. Yeah, I feel like if you're playing Assassin's Creed for combat, I don't know what you're...
Yeah, it's always more about... It's about exploration and seeing the way they render the worlds and stuff. And if you're a crazy person like me, it's about the story too, but I wouldn't expect it to resonate with most folks.
I have no idea what's going on with the story, outside of the Animus anymore. The last game I played was 3.
See, I played Syndicate, and I haven't played Origins, and now I'm playing Odyssey, and I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know.
It went weird, dumb places, but it they've sort of been stalling for a while, I think, sort of since really Assassin's Creed 4 was the last one that moved the meta narrative forward. And I haven't played through Origins enough. I only got out of the Animus once when I was playing it last year. So I don't know what Origins maybe is a bigger jump forward, but the movie did more to advance the meta narrative outside of the Animus than any game had since 3 or 4.
Yeah, they're really dialing it back.
Also,
3 was light spoilers, I guess, but I mean, I'll preface it with that. But 3, the whole thing was Desmond had to choose between letting the world get blown up, basically get fried, so that it was just a bunch of everyone had to start from square one again, with him kind of as the leader, or sacrificing himself to save the world as it is, and the canonical end is that he sacrifices himself to save everybody, obviously. And then like over the course of the next few ones, it was about how like Abstergo was using his corpse to like get to genetic memories that existed in his bloodline still. That's how you got the like Edward Kenway stuff. And then from there, it was like Juno came back as not an AI, but she was like living in computer systems. She was one of the like precursors that was bad. And so that's kind of been where the story has been, is that Juno is trying to make a comeback by being in like Abstergo's computer systems. And there's been a couple where you've like inadvertently helped her in the meta narrative by completing these like shutting down and turning on servers and stuff.
This sounds real dumb.
It's dumb. It is real dumb, but I kind of like it because it's esoteric and weird, and like I think it's delivered in an interesting way. The delivery method is a lot more interesting than what the narrative actually is, but the way that they deliver things through like getting out of the Animus and reading emails and like going to websites in the game and stuff is more interesting to me than the actual story, but it's okay because I still like the way they deliver it. Syndicate was weird because Syndicate was like about how the two, what are their names? Adam Smith, the British guy who was in all the earlier ones as like one of your handlers, him and the woman that lived, they were like infiltrating an Abstergo headquarters where Otto Berg was. Otto Berg was like this bad guy who was like on a kill squad for the Templars at Abstergo, and it was all about like they had to find this artifact that they were going to use, the cloak that they were going to use to shroud, I guess is what it was, that they were going to use to like, it was going to help the Templars. And so the modern day stuff was literally just like National Treasure, but with those two characters going around London trying to like hunt down Otto Berg and stop him before he got the shroud. And you were in the Animus trying to tell them where the shroud was. That was the like meta story of Syndicate. Syndicate was good because of all the other stories that were taking place actually in Victorian London for the two characters. That stuff was really cool. The meta story of Syndicate was really bad.
It was also, since I hadn't gotten the whole meta story for, you know, a lot of the games, I just had no idea what was going on. So I was just like, okay, I get we're doing this. So it's like, let's get back to Edie and Jacob, please.
Wait, should we just start this podcast? Because we've been talking about Assassin's Creed lore.
We're just talking about Assassin's Creed, like, that's part of the podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll have to go get laundry in like 10 minutes, and then we can, that can be a time cap on our Assassin's Creed conversation. No, doesn't have to be, but I could talk about Assassin's Creed lore all day. Because then the movie...
Oh my god, no.
The wildest thing about Origins is that I will not explain the lore of the movie, but it references the movie. Like, the movie is a canonical thing that happens.
Oh yes. My god.
Yes, it is a separate thing from the rest of the story, but it actually happened in the universe.
So that weird, like, I remember that thing having a weird version of the Animus.
Yeah, so the idea was that was an Animus prototype that Abstergo was building. That's largely what the narrative in Origins talks about, is less about what the characters, the main character in the movie did, and more about what Marion Cotillard's character did with like working on the Animus. Her character emails your character out of the Animus in Origins about like basically the character that's in the Animus in Origins got screwed over by the woman from the movie, and her prototypes were like, she stole information from her prototypes to build the Animus that's in the movie. Yeah.
Just gonna start shaking my head again.
All right, so I'm assuming that one of us has to lead Pat. So who should it be? I don't mind either way.
Yeah, I'm not a good host because I constantly have to switch stuff and mute my mic.
I mean,
if you're doing laundry, I can host.
Yeah, we just have to say this is Gaming Fix episode 40, right? We're on 40.
40.
Party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're Pat Alex and Allison this week.
Yeah.
Paw.
Pa. Okay. Yeah, I was actually just thinking we need to have a thing.
Or is APA some kind of writing format?
Yeah.
APA.
It's the American Psychological Association.
Oh, that's us.
Oh. Oh no. We're going to be giving people real bad advice. It's like dancers.
All right. So let's just get this thing started.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 40 of Gaming Fix. I'm Allison, and I'm hosting today, which we just decided about 2 minutes ago. Joining me today is Alex.
Hey, I now work cross-platform between PS4, PC, and Xbone.
Oh, good for you. No Switch, though?
No, of course not.
Of course not. And also our best boy, Pat.
I'm now available on Game Pass, and you can sync saves between your Xbox One and Windows.
All right, sounds good. So it's us, the APA group today, just us three. Before we decided we are the American Psychological Association, so take this as strict psychiatric advice.
Don't do that.
And you don't need therapy if you listen to this podcast. We can all endorse that.
Yep, we're basically
Totally. Yeah.
CBT. That's us.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about some video games. And so let's get started with that and just do minimal psychiatric advice. So Alex, let's start with you. What are you bringing today?
So what you should do is you should keep a journal. And you should write down when you're feeling good. Just be like, yeah, this is what I was thinking when I was feeling good. When you're feeling bad, this is what I was thinking when I was feeling bad. I was mostly feeling good this week because I was playing a bunch of Overwatch again because I was too busy to play other games. So there's really nothing more to say about that. We talked about it last week. I put a little itty bitty, like let's call it 10 minutes into crosscode before I had to step away from it. And I don't know, from 10 minutes that game seems really neat, but that's not enough to say anything.
I'm so torn on that game because I want to play it and like it really bad, but every time I look at it, like when I hear people talk about it, I'm like, God, I want to play that game. But then when I actually look at it, I go, I don't know if this is for me. So like I haven't bought it yet, but
yeah, I bought it too, and I've played maybe 2 hours of it so far.
So you're further than I am for sure.
Yeah, I've gotten through a lot of the kind of setup. It seems really cool. There's just too many games to get real into.
Yeah.
And I feel like partially I kind of want to be the person that's like reps a lot of the indie games at Game of the Year at the end of the year, and I'm like, oh, but I have so many to play. So
yeah, for sure.
Crosscode's definitely one that I want to play more before the end of the year, though.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, no, it's been a very light video game week for me. I can talk all about Kubernetes if you guys want to talk programming. So yeah, hey, listeners, if you have Kubernetes questions, shoot me an @ on Pornhub.
I think an interesting Overwatch thing right now is like, it feels like, as someone who has sort of, played that game on and off since it came out and always been pretty interested in it, it feels like they're kind of building to something to me a little bit. They've been announcing so many collectibles recently, which maybe that's the end of it. Maybe it's just that they're trying to sell more merchandise, but I don't know. It feels like with the amount of collectibles they're doing, the Halloween events starting, that there's more eyes on Overwatch than there has been since the last big kind of like new character, lore dump, new map sort of push. And I'm just wondering, with BlizzCon like a month and a half away, sometime in November, I'm wondering if maybe there's something they're going to announce, something big there, that's more than just like a new character or something. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on like where you could see the next level for Overwatch being?
I kind of see Overwatch, the base game, as kind of like Dota 2, where it's just, or League, or any of those kinds of service games, where it's the same game forever, but then they just kind of add to it, be it cosmetics or new game modes or whatever. So possibly there's a new game mode that would be a thing, or like, I'm not sure, because what kind of event, like if I think of events, like there's obviously the Halloween event, but I'm trying to think of more gameplay oriented events like the Dota ones, how they had their battle pass and such. Like,
Yeah.
could there be something similar in Overwatch? I mean, what's it called? Fortnite does that too, don't they?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, actually, I think Dota kind of started that, but Fortnite's definitely the one that got everyone else to do it. A lot of other, like Paladins, for example, which I'm a pretty big fan of, sort of similar to Overwatch, high res shooter, hero shooter. They went to a model where they used to just have like loot chests. You would buy a character pack for like $25-$30 that would get you all the characters forever and ever, or you could play it for free and not have all the characters and play on a rotation. But if you bought the character pack, then you could also get cosmetics out of chests or just by buying them straight up from the store, kind of an Overwatch-like model. But once Fortnite added the Battle Pass to Battle Royale, Paladins now has a similar Battle Pass system, and I know several other games have kind of adopted the same thing. So I could totally see that making its way to Overwatch. I think Blizzard is so, they don't like to crib things from other games unless they can make it seem like they're the ones who came up with it. So like, obviously Overwatch is heavily inspired by Team Fortress, but you wouldn't know that if you didn't know about, well, I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but I don't know. They own it so much. They own the concept so hard with Overwatch. It's not like, it doesn't feel like an homage or like it's inspired by another game. It feels like it's very much its own thing, even though it is heavily inspired by another game. So I don't know that they would do something where they just straight like have a battle pass. That almost seems too derivative for them, even though it would probably make them a lot of money. I feel like they would have to do something unique to it that would make it different somehow.
Yeah, I mean, Blizzard is...
I do think...
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Oh, I do think that you are onto something, though, about them. They're kind of working their way to something, because this just occurred to me that Overwatch was just in the Humble Monthly, and it was
that's another
pretty heavily advertised. So it seems like they're probably trying to get as many people playing Overwatch as possible. So granted, that's kind of their MO, because they want to sell loot boxes, they want to sell merch, they want, the base game is only the first purchasing. But if the Humble Monthly, granted, is like, it's not that much money. It's so getting that is a really cheap way to get was a really cheap way to get over.
Yeah,
I think maybe they're trying to get more people in on it and hopefully lead up to whatever.
Yeah, I feel like the kind of person that they make a lot of money off of loot chests in that game, even though it's not, you don't really think about it because of their event systems. It encourages you, I don't want to say in a predatory way, because I think it's pretty fair, but it does encourage you to buy loot boxes during the events so that you can get the event specific skins.
It's certainly way more fair since they got rid of duplicates.
Yeah. When there were duplicates, it was less fair, but
yeah, that was annoying.
I guess I don't think it's predatory, totally. At least. But they do encourage you to buy loot boxes, not with any specific verbiage in the game, but just by nature of like, you can only get this loot chest for a month, and once it's the last week of the event, if you didn't get the skin you want, you may as well spend $10 and get some loot crates. So they kind of encourage that, but I feel like the kind of person that's going to get it through Humble Monthly who didn't own it already is probably not the kind of person that's going to buy loot boxes at all in that game.
True.
Which isn't to say that like people who want to spend money in games don't have Humble Monthly. I mean, I have Humble Monthly and I spend a lot of money on in-game transactions, but
same.
But we all also already owned Overwatch. So anyone who's holding out on it, I feel like they're not going to jump in and buy a bunch of loot boxes.
Yeah, because Overwatch is old at this point. It's 2 years old.
Yeah, it feels like it's older than that because the beta was so long for it too.
That's true.
So I wonder, this is my dream scenario. It's probably not going to happen. I acknowledge that, it's unlikely. My dream scenario is like this game has a bunch of unique characters with unique shooter mechanics. I would love it if every like 6 months for eternity, they would say, all right, $20, you get a unique skin and a 4-hour campaign with this character. And that's it.
Oh, shit.
It doesn't have to be like big, long, like 8-hour game, because I think it would get old playing the same character for too long, because their mechanics aren't unique enough that a single player campaign with them would be fun for too long. But if it was like $20 for an expansion, and then you could play Tracer's story for 4 hours, that would be so cool. And they could just like, there's so many characters, they could just do that. It would add hundreds of dollars that they could charge in DLC for that game, but then make it something that it doesn't affect content for multiplayer at all. So it's not siloing anything. And maybe the only thing that you get is a special skin for the multiplayer. I think that would be super cool. I don't know that they're going to do it.
Yeah.
But that's my.
I mean, something along those lines would be kind of rad. It'd be nice to have more of that kind of single player content. I say as somebody that doesn't really like play multiplayer games, but likes Overwatch. So
yeah,
I would pay all that money for that Diva story. Let me tell you.
Exactly. Yeah, and I would totally spend $20 every few to 6 months to be able to do that. That would be so cool to see more of the story. The only thing I would worry about with that is that I don't think Blizzard has ever written a good story before, like a single time. There's elements of Warcraft story that are endearing for sure, and there's elements of StarCraft story that are endearing. I think the Diablo story and lore is like, those games are great, but that's totally incomprehensible and silly and stupid. Yep. Is my opinion. Deckard Cain is a good character. That's about as much as I'll say about Diablo.
Good thing Sam's not here.
I know Sam and I would have good hit, but I'm very confident in my stance that Diablo's story is bad, so I'm happy to debate it with people. It's just the whole story is Angel's bad, Devil's bad, they fight, people get caught in the middle. That's it. That is the extent of Diablo's story. And like Warcraft has some okay moments and characters. It has very memorable characters, and that's what makes WoW kind of work, I think. But then like, I don't know, StarCraft was good for a while, and then StarCraft 2 went in really weird places. So I'm a little bit hesitant to trust their narrative team to actually do justice to the characters that they've built with Overwatch. The way that they drip feed lore maybe is more appropriate, because they have obviously some of the best animators in the business, but
easily.
Yeah. Anyway, I think a lot about Overwatch these days because they got to be doing something.
So Cheska and I had a really interesting conversation. I think it was actually yesterday. It's too bad we couldn't invite her on to actually continue it. But as you know, she works in the game industry. And we were talking about how there's been a lot of studio closures and just kind of weird news in the industry that way, and how it's kind of unstable. And there's, if you look at the Giant Bomb Facebook group, there's been posts about like, are we headed for another crash kind of stuff? And while I don't think we're going for another crash, like one of the first things, one of the first examples I could think of kind of like, think about, we had PUBG, then we had Fortnite, then we had all those derivative games, and ultimately Boss Key Studios got shut down because of that, you know, because Radical Heights or whatever was just such a flop. And that was completely derivative. And we've had derivative games coming out on, cell phones and stuff from Chinese companies knocking off whatever the popular game of the month is. So that's nothing new, but it's getting more and more popular. And the first big instance I could think of it was when people had the perception of Battleborn being the same thing as Overwatch. And that kind of like wrecked things for Gearbox a little bit. Because like that game got shut down within like a couple months. Well, if not shut down, then had like a very tiny player base.
Yeah.
And which just led me to think, like, recently we've had so many studio closures. We've had Carbine Studio just this week, Capcom Vancouver, Telltale, Big Fish also this week. Big Fish just scaled down, but I don't know. Like, I feel like this is bigger than Overwatch. It's bigger than all of that. Do you think that the Overwatch style of paid game with some free-to-play aspects, as in like loot boxes and such, is the way of the future? Or are we going to see the end of the $60 game in a few years? Or is it all going to be free-to-play?
I don't think we're going to see the end of the $60 game anytime soon. Mostly because stuff like Spider-Man and God of War were sold like crazy. So I think that there's still a market for that. But at the time, I think that we're getting to the point where studio expectations for revenue are so high because of the budgets of some of these AAA games are so high that it's like it's kind of unsustainable as it is right now.
Like team sizes are like in the 300s in some places, and like creating HD assets takes forever.
Right. Like I remember the first Tomb Raider reboot came out. It sold really well, but it still was considered a quote unquote disappointment because the expectations were through the roof.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if having those high expectations is in any way sustainable.
I think for starters, I actually haven't paid $60 for a game in a while. I think that price point is kind of phasing out, as I'm aware plenty of people do, but like, by which I mean I have bought deluxe editions of games. Like I have spent $100 on a game multiple times this year, and I've spent 20, 30-ish, $35 on a game a bunch of times this year, but I haven't actually bought a game at the $60 price point for a while. And I know that plenty of people do, plenty of people don't buy the deluxe editions, but I think that the way that that tactics, like you get to play it early and you get the bundled pass, like hell, I got Destiny Forsaken this week, and I got that with the annual pass because I figured like it's cheaper to buy it with the annual pass, and I know I'm going to want to play Destiny next year, so I may as well just grab it because I'm here. And I think that the way that I think that's going to continue to become more and more prevalent is like, hey, you could buy the base game, but for a little bit extra, you could get this, this, and this. And I don't think part of the reason I kind of feel good about buying those more expensive editions, because even though I don't think that you necessarily get value out of, like Red Dead is a great example. I don't know that the $100 edition of Red Dead actually includes an extra $40 of value in there. I felt pretty comfortable with it in terms of like Spider-Man, because you get the expansion pass, but like God of War is another one. I bought the expensive version of God of War. It wasn't really worth it, I don't think, in the end. There's no DLC coming for that game. It was just like a digital comic and some themes and some extra in-game items that you stop using after a few hours because you get better stuff anyway. But I think that that's kind of the way that they're going to offset rising costs of games. And I do think that you're going to see fewer and fewer of those kinds of AAA games. And if you when you look at like the PS2 and the Xbox and then into the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, it felt like on release day, and I worked at GameStop during those eras, like it felt like when Tuesday rolled around, you would get one sequel game and then like a couple of mid-tier like B game kind of games, and then that weren't sequels to anything, that were new IPs, and then one big AAA new IP. And it didn't. Now it's like new IP is like non-existent. That doesn't happen. Like Anthem is the only. I can't think of other big AAA games from this year that weren't based on an existing franchise. And Anthem isn't even out yet, obviously. And I'm sure it happened, but like,
I'm like seriously trying to think of that.
These Happy Few doesn't count as AAA,
right? It's tough. I don't know that I would call it a AAA game.
But yeah, I totally get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, like less and less. They have to invest in the sure things. Now the new stuff that even major studios are doing comes out as a smaller project. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's going to continue to be the trend, which is disappointing because I think that I'm super
Traveler?
into. That is one. But there you go. It's from Nintendo. Nintendo is far more likely to take, and it's not from Nintendo, I know, but it's a Nintendo exclusive. And you see that experimentation happen way more on Nintendo consoles than you do on other platforms.
Yeah, Nintendo also does not really care about third parties. Like the Switch is mostly a Nintendo device.
Yeah, right.
Nintendo and indies and stuff too. Because for me, my Switch has become mostly like indies machine.
Right.
I will be right back in like 2 minutes. You guys should keep talking about this stuff.
No
Sounds good. Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting topic though, because it's. I feel like I don't want to be like fatalistic about it, but I feel like things are changing. And the one thing that is kind of getting to me is those expensive versions that have you can play it early, because that is very enticing for me, being very impatient. Like this week, I was fighting myself to not buy the $110 edition Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Because I had a week and really wanted to play it. So I'm just like, let me play this game now. I see it in the store, but I can't buy it. So I don't know if it's something that's necessarily going to influence me, because I had that realization of, oh, this is an additional $50 that I could spend on other games.
Yeah.
But it's I've seen that a lot more, and it's a little.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at the trends in industries other than games that involve software as a service is becoming such a huge thing. Like Microsoft Office, you can't really buy Word and stuff, PowerPoint on its own. You have to get it in Office 365. Like,
oh no, yeah.
So like, even like productivity software and professional software is moving away from having you purchase a boxed item and moving into something which is constantly updated and is, it's software as a service. And I think games are kind of the last bastion of buying a box and then, that's the box forever.
Right. And I think, even when it comes to things like movies and television, like subscription services are such a big deal there. A lot of people just don't buy physical copies of stuff anymore, or even buy digital copies of things. They just either rent it or they watch whatever's on Netflix or HBO or Hulu or something. So it's I mean, with stuff with like Game Pass becoming more of a push for Microsoft, I wonder if that's something that they're kind of considering instead of hey, pay this lump sum to buy a game, pay us $20 a month.
Yeah.
And you get games. I don't know if I'm necessarily, 100% a fan of it, but I feel like whatever happens, like Nintendo's always going to do their own weird thing, and indie games are always there. So it'll be fine, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be very interested in coming back to that topic in like 2 years.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, it's absolutely changed in the past 5, and it's definitely going to be different in a shorter time period from today.
The thing that kind of makes me really intrigued is just how well the Spider-Man game did and how well God of War did, particularly because those are games that really kind of buck that trend, where they're very like you get the entire game when you pay the $60.
Yeah. And
there's going to be an expansion and there's going to be all this stuff, but it doesn't feel similarly like games as service as a multiplayer game does, or even as like Assassin's Creed, where if you open up the menu, there's literally a very easy button to go to the store and buy microtransactions and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, because I know that like Spider-Man in particular did so well that they're like, oh, we got to make more games like this. And I know that I'm going to buy the DLC for that, which I don't know if I would necessarily for like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I don't know if I'm going to be buying much DLC for that, but I'm 100% going to buy and play everything that Spider-Man has. So it's it's hard to say.
Who was I think it was a publisher that said this. I can't remember who it was that basically said that the big single player experience, those games are dead. But then, like, obviously this year kind of disproved it, but I forget who it was. I think it might have been Activision.
Was it or EA?
Yeah, like one of those two. It might have been EA,
like
actually.
when EA canceled that Star Wars game, maybe?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like, but yeah, big publisher definitely said that. But then Spider-Man is like the fastest selling PlayStation 4 game, which replaced God of War.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez. Yeah, Spider-Man sold 3.3 million copies in its first 3 days of release. So
that's actually pretty silly.
Yeah. So, like, I think that there is definitely a market for the single player game comes for, and you get everything for. And there's definitely a market for good games. And I don't know if I wonder, like, part of me wonders if, like, we're seeing this glut of like the battle royale games. Like, I totally forgot that phrase for a second. With like PUBG and Fortnite, and but like you mentioned with Radical Heights, it's like if some of those games don't like it being a game in that genre doesn't necessarily mean success. And I'm kind of wondering if that might also happen with the kind of games that game as service type games. Like I think the biggest thing to see what it'll be is how Anthem does, because it definitely seems to be kind of like doing some of that similar vibe to Destiny, and it's just how many games as service games can the industry really support? Yeah,
and I think the first wave of failures that we saw with that was MMOs. Like, if you think about how successful WoW was for years, and then we had all these people chasing the WoW money, and then the Old Republic came out, and it was just barely successful despite being one of the biggest franchises in the world. And then, like, I think it was that same E3, like 2012 or probably 2012, where they announced Elder Scrolls Online, and like the reports were always, you just heard people being like, "Why are you making this?" Like people were actively just like kind of throwing shade at them, being like, why? So I think that was like the first wave of kind of what we're talking about here, but I feel like we're going to see pushback because the industry, like if you look at Steam, it's so inundated with new games all the time. Like, like you can make the best game in the world, but if you don't get discovered, then like, if you don't have the big marketing bucks, if you don't have the word of mouth and all that kind of stuff, then it's just going to fall by the wayside, even if it's a fantastic game.
Especially too, I'm back.
Hi.
Hi.
Especially, that's something that I've been kind of thinking about a lot recently, because like I've started to look at the Steam new releases every week, which I never really did before, because I mean, video games are my biggest hobby. Like I look at game news every day. So it used to be like I knew everything that was coming out. I could tell you off the dome what was coming out for the next month every week. But like I looked on Steam this week, and there's this Vigilantes game that's like a strategy RPG that looks kind of interesting. And I don't know what the quality of any of these games are, or if they have any issues.
Right.
I haven't looked into all of them. But like there's this roguelite VR game that came out that looks kind of cool. There's this game called I'm Not a Monster that's like a mafia werewolf kind of game, but multiplayer. There's the Deep Sky Derelicts game that was that's like put out by 1C and made by this indie developer. Like these are all games that look interesting to me that I might check out, and I didn't know any of them were coming.
Well, I mean, frankly, like if you didn't know that Donut County was coming out, like it's entirely possible that game could have gotten overlooked. Like, and it's really quality and has amazing writing. But if it hadn't had like, the word of mouth of like, the designer worked on these other games, then no one would have seen it. I mean, like I'm very much the same as you, looking at new releases and being like, I have no idea what this is. Like, as much of a joke as it was the very start of this year, I picked up Dump in the Dark because I was looking through new and just being like, I have no idea what this is. Let's just try it. And like,
Yeah.
I feel like not a lot of people actually do that, which is
Yeah.
which is the scary part
And on
for a
the one
developer.
hand-
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and on the one hand, I definitely understand that this is kind of like we're just getting inundated with games on like Steam, and I've seen that's a lot on the Switch store too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm kind of happy that so many people are able to make their own games, and that they're able to distribute them, even if it's not necessarily. I mean, everybody would agree that the Steam's not the best curation system by far, but I mean, I feel like in general the fact that the bar is getting lower for to make their games and there is overall a good thing, even if there's some quirks in getting the curation system or getting Steam right.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's just like we are people who look into we are people who are really invested in the industry even and pay attention to a lot, and we didn't know or I didn't know that some of these games were releasing. So imagine if you're like just someone who plays games as a hobby and maybe like has Steam installed on their laptop, which is still the majority of people playing games on the platform. It's not. Majority of people are buying a couple of games maybe every few months on the platform. And then when you extend that out to like the console space, like I couldn't even begin to tell you what's new that's not a major AAA game on Xbox One, for example, because like they just don't really surface it. And now games are so expensive to just make. Who has the money to like pay to market them to outside of AAA studios? And even they can't seem to I don't even know that it's sustainable at that scale either.
I mean, go back to Boss Key.
Exactly.
That was like some of the best developers in the industry, or some of the most seasoned developers in the industry, and they went down. Same with Telltale.
I also think there's something to be said for, and this is not really to speak to the Telltale. First of all, if your studio is going to close, you know that with enough time to warn your employees, and there's no excuse for not doing that. So, and it's never a good thing for people to lose jobs either. So that's not at all what I'm getting at with what I'm going to say. But like in the case of Boss Key, the Lawbreakers was fine. I played it a fair bit. Actually, I probably played 5 or 6 hours of it. It was okay. It was not unique or original or interesting really at all. And so they poured everything into this game that was really well designed, but that wasn't worlds better than something like Overwatch, and certainly wasn't that unique. So to some extent, like in my ideal universe, everyone would be able to make exactly the game they want and live a sustainable, healthy life while doing that. But I don't know that a society exists where that will work, even if it's not capitalistic. And so like, there's a part of me that's like, you do still have to, your studio has to produce something that holds value to people. And that's harsh and not a fun thing to think about. And it also doesn't mean that any one person working on a project is not good at what they do if they put out something that's either unoriginal or not good. But like, it's tough because like Capcom Vancouver is a good example of this. Like I know that there are some people that enjoyed the last Dead Rising game, but if you look at how those games performed critically and the word of mouth around them, they didn't seem like they were really setting the world on fire. They seemed pretty meh. So does that mean that people should lose their jobs? No, I don't want people to ever lose their jobs, but you do kind of have to think about like, you still have to make a good game too. Like if you put out stuff that's not great, none of us want to mourn the death of a studio, but I would also say that that studios you still have to put something out that's good too, you know? And that's the harsh reality of it that sucks. That's hard to kind of consider, but that kind of has to be considered too.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. And there's like always the weird like mathematics that you just never know what's going to pay off, basically, because I mean like it's hard to say whether going off and doing your own thing, regardless of what happens, is going to make the money, or if following the trend's going to make the money. I mean, like you said, you don't want to necessarily say they all have to be about making money, but at a certain point, you know, you got to pay your devs.
Yeah,
it is
still a business.
That's really what I'm getting to is not so much like make me a good game, because I don't want to spend money on a bad game. That's not my point. My point is more that like you have to pay your staff is really where I'm getting to, is like you have to make money to pay your staff, and you can't make money on a bad product, and usually a bad product isn't the result of bad staff. It's the result of bad management, really. Bad management of teams, bad management of resources. So I don't know. Sometimes I look at studios like Gearbox is a great example. Battleborn didn't need to be made. Battleborn wasn't good, and it didn't. I bought one of the expensive editions of Battleborn because I really like the concept of like shooter MOBA mingling. So I played a lot of that game, and it just wasn't very good. And it wasn't very good because it didn't need to happen. Like, it was a very clear, like, this game is ill-conceived and misguided from the jump. And
I mean, you could say that about a lot of Gearbox games.
Yeah, totally. That's what I'm saying. And so, like, does that mean that I want people at Gearbox to lose their jobs? Absolutely not. I don't want to see people out of work. But and does that mean that I think that the people that work at Gearbox are bad at their jobs? No. But I think sometimes when you have people, and I don't know everything about the structure of Gearbox, but like Randy Pitchford still seems pretty engaged in directing the projects of this, not directing them on a creative level, but directing them on a very high, like, we're going to make a game that's about this. We're going to make a new Borderlands. We're going to make a game that's like a MOBA shooter. And I'm sure he doesn't come up with all those concepts on his own. I'm sure there's internal pitches and all that. That's how studios tend to work. But sometimes when you have someone who's like really engaged on the business side of a thing and really engaged in picking projects, that seems to be a dangerous combination that leads to some weird, maybe misguided things happening at studios. I think that was probably the case at Telltale too, from what I've heard about the way their management was shaken up. They had bad management that was replaced by people who had been at the company for a long time in creative roles, but they maybe weren't the best at managing the company and managing its resources. So it's an interesting problem, and I don't know really how to solve it, because games are a very unique kind of art where the creatives are empowered at a business level. Like, if you're like a band, it's harder to make it because there's more of you, but like, you don't have to think about the business as much when you're making your art, I guess. Like, you can play music in your garage and make incredible music. Whereas with games, it's so time consuming to write code and to build engines and stuff like that. It seems like it's harder. You need more support from a business perspective than you do in a lot of other art forms, I guess, if that makes any sense. And I don't know. I mean,
to an extent, but there are all those games too that where there are people who are just making games on their own. And granted, that's not going to be the same thing as necessarily a AAA game, but
it's definitely a different thing.
Recording out of, but a band recording out of their garage isn't going to be necessarily the same thing as somebody that has like a full studio backing.
Yeah, although the gap is not that wide anymore with music. You can make really professional sounding music in your home studio. I mean, you need more investment for sure than just having like an 8-track in your garage, but you can make, EDM music that technically sounds the same as Odessa in your basement if you know how to use the tools effectively in a studio that costs maybe a couple $1,000s. Sure. So, whereas with video games, I feel like I am a big fan of what indie developers put out. So this is not a criticism of indie games, and I don't think that they're anything less than AAA experiences. But something like Donut County, the scale of that game is very different than something like Assassin's Creed.
Well, right. But I mean, but not necessarily by purchase, I guess, because I'm just thinking of stuff like Stardew Valley or Undertale that have really captured a lot of people and have become really big. Yeah. And granted, at the same level of something like Fortnite or whatever, but I think that there is still potential for games to be made by very small teams that still grab a lot of people.
Oh yeah, I'm not arguing that. I think that those are more sustainable, if anything, because Donut County doesn't need to sell 10 million units to be able to fund his next game. Like,
right.
They only need to support 3 people, I think, is the total number of people that worked on that game. And like, Stardew Valley is a great example too. Like, the developer of that game, I forget his name, but it was like one guy who made 90% of that game. So the fact that it blew up like it did means that he has tons of finances now to make his next project, and that's great. Like something like Assassin's Creed, it's probably like 1,000 people worked on that game when you think of the number of studios at Ubisoft that touch those games. And so they have to sell enough copies to support the livelihoods of all of those people. And that's when you start seeing, like, is a $60 game really going to, even if it sells twice as much, 10 times as much as Stardew Valley, can a $60 game support that many people as opposed to something like Stardew Valley that costs 1/3 of the price and sells to 1/3 of the people, but it's only one guy that it needs to support? And that's
or is,
I mean, sorry, I was just gonna say, there's the biggest example I can think of is basically the first early access game that I can think of also is Minecraft.
Minecraft, yeah, sure.
Because Notch, right?
Yeah.
So, but again, I think it comes down to discoverability and how inundated services are like Steam. And this actually makes me really, I've talked about this in our chat before, but I really want to invite my friend who's a professional streamer on, because we actually were talking about discoverability just this morning, because she's a very good streamer. She has extremely high production values. Like, she's really good at what she does, and she's been doing it for like 5 years now. But she started streaming a lot of Path of Exile and saw like her daily stream viewers go down by like 60% or more. Just because, you know, like, she as a streamer, like, not even like, it's kind of ancillary to the actual video game development side of things. She has to, you know, keep trends in mind and think, oh, if I stream Hearthstone, like, even though I don't really want to play Hearthstone, like, I'm going to get 50 to 100% more viewers. Like,
yeah.
Right.
And it's just such an interesting problem, discoverability.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's also interesting on the streaming front too, because I've kind of been dabbling in streaming lately. And like, granted, it's just me doing it just kind of for, I'm playing a game on my PC, why not? So I don't really necessarily care for it to become my livelihood. But at the same time, you just start thinking like, okay, I am starting from scratch. How do you get people to find you? It's like, it's a really, really hard thing. And I imagine that like a lot of people are struggling with that, especially with like indie devs.
Yeah.
Putting your game on Steam doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do. Yeah. It's going to sell well, if at all.
Yep.
Like
And I think there's an easy parallel to draw across multiple industries, like we were talking about with like with you, Pat. You were just mentioning with music. You can get Reaper for free and produce 100% professional sounding music. You can download OBS for free and start streaming today. You can download Unity right now and start making your own game. Like, the tools have finally gotten to a place where they're accessible, and the learning materials, you can go to Google and learn how to code C# really basically and get started in Unity today. Like, you can download plugins that are going to make it way easier for you, all that kind of stuff. So creating the art has the barrier to entry there has gotten way lower, especially when you compare it to like the 90s, when to make a game was, well, you had to innovate and you had to make everything yourself because the standards weren't set. But now we kind of have standards, and we have protocol, if you want to think of it that way. Like, we have defined ways of, this is how you do ray tracing, this is how you do hit scanning on a weapon and stuff like that. Like the stuff that John Carmack came up with in the 90s. So it's really hard to innovate, and because the tools are so easily accessible, it means anybody can do it. But yeah, it's not a problem inherent to just the games industry. It's anything creative.
Totally. And I think it's the problem that is unique to the games industry is, while it is not hard to get started, when you look at the costs of, to go back to music again, if you look at like, we'll say AAA music, like we'll say like somebody like Ariana Grande, for example.
Yeah, Drake, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, or Drake. Yeah, is another good example. These are people who the entirety, all of the cost in making their music as popular and like well known as it is comes from a marketing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It costs Drake nothing at this point to record an album. I mean, it's his time, which it's not labor shouldn't be free. You shouldn't think of that as nothing, I guess. But it's the actual like money changing hands in a business sense comes from marketing completely. And the struggle, I think, when it comes to games is while you can get started and you can make something genuinely cool and interesting on your own without any funding from a big publisher, it is just, and maybe it'll get there someday, there is no way that a single person in their free time could build Red Dead Redemption 2 or Assassin's Creed Odyssey or Forza Horizon 4.
But that's the same thing with like the film industry too.
Totally.
Like
yes.
Nobody can make Avengers Infinity War by themselves.
Absolutely.
Whereas there are a lot of movies that are being shot on iPhones now. So it's, there is that still. Right.
But I guess the point that I'm kind of trying to make, and this is true of film as well, is that not in terms of music, the biggest cost to promoting a Drake album is marketing. But to make something like Red Dead Redemption 2, you need 5 years of development time with hundreds of people working on it on top of a marketing budget to make sure that people know about it. And that's not the best example because everyone knows what Rockstar does. But for something like even like Forza Horizon 4, if Microsoft didn't spend money on marketing that game, we might know about it, but like they have to sell that game to people at Target. They have to sell that game to people who watch football on Sunday, like who don't even know necessarily what Forza is. So to do that, they have to spend a ton of money on marketing. And that's where I don't know how sustainable AAA development is right now. And it'll be interesting to see how these studios continue to make money, especially people like EA and Microsoft first party, when they're moving to these subscription-based services where they're selling you their games as part of a package. I don't know. I'm really curious to see how Forza, well, who knows what we'll actually get in terms of information, but I'm curious to see how Forza does for Microsoft financially, because it's an expensive game and they're offering it at a crazy deal. So
yeah. On that note, how is Horizon?
I think it's the best driving game I've ever played. I think it's
wait, that's a big statement.
It is a big statement, but I mean, I would have said Burnout Paradise is my favorite driving game prior to that. And then we've talked about it kind of jokingly, but I genuinely do. Midtown Madness is one of my favorite driving experiences ever too.
Totally.
Forza is just, there's going to be people who hear that and say like, no way, man, Burnout Paradise, it's got nothing on Burnout. I played Burnout Paradise Remastered. It's still a fantastic game, but the ways that Forza simplifies discoverability and accessibility are so extreme that you can always find something to do within 2 minutes of booting up Forza, and it feels meaningful. It's just like, it's really, really, really fantastic.
It seems like the best blend of arcadey to simi.
Yes, because the handling model, I think a misconception about Forza Horizon that a lot of people have is that it is a more arcadey game than Forza Motorsport. That's actually not true. The driving model is the same between both games. It defaults to more, well, actually anymore, I don't even think this is true. Early on, I believe the assists defaulted to a more arcadey version than Motorsport, but now I'm pretty sure the base is the same on both games. But like, you can turn off traction control, you can turn off ABS, you can set steering to simulation steering, so it feels like it's simulating the physics model more directly. You can turn on manual transmission. You can make it as much of a sim as Motorsport is, and Motorsport is very much a sim.
So someone could play this with either a controller or a steering or a racing wheel.
Yeah, you can plug a Fanatec racing wheel in with a clutch and an H shifter and like have a racing seat and play this game with the same degree of accuracy and realism that you could play Forza Motorsport.
Yeah,
it's got all that under the hood. It has the entirety of Motorsport's handling model built into this larger open world setting.
That's super appealing. I'm looking to get into it soon. I'm gonna activate my Game Pass sometime soon.
I love that like 3 of us are all activating our Game Pass at once just so we can play Forza.
I mean, it's the most compelling reason to try Game Pass that has happened since the service launched. I mean, I kind of enjoyed Sea of Thieves. I keep meaning to check it out again because they've added a bunch to it. But Forza is like a complete. I don't know. It might be my game of the year even at this point. Like I have gotten so much out of it that. It almost, even though it doesn't have the kind of narrative brilliance of something like God of War, it almost doesn't need it because it's just so fun to play, and it just always feels good to play. I'm the kind of person that I get obsessive about completing certain things in games, and sometimes I get frustrated if they're kind of hard. But Forza, I've gotten frustrated at my inability to do things sometimes, but I've never gotten angry at the game, and I've always like loved it when it's a challenge, and that's cool. That's like not a normal thing for me at all, to like want to push myself the way that this game invites you to and stuff.
I mean, I remember you talking kind of positively about a flawed game with the Crew too, and
right, yeah,
like this seems like any issue you could have possibly had with the Crew 2 has been addressed in here.
Oh yeah, this game is light years. I mean, it really puts the Crew 2 to shame. When you put these two games next to each other, the Crew 2 looks like a terrible game for sure. And I am someone who enjoyed that game, especially because Horizon. I mean, it doesn't have boats or planes, but it has multiple disciplines too. It's not just road racing. It has off-road races. It has drift stuff, it has drag stuff, it has everything that you would want, and it does it beautifully. And things like the drift club stuff is a great example. I bashed my head against a wall to get to the point where I had 3 stars on every drift challenge. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you have to, it's not like in the Crew, you drift by equipping a drift car and then turning. That's it. There's no physics at play. It just is like drift cars drift.
It's like you're playing Ridge Racer.
In Forza, there are drift cars, but they're drift cars because they're literally tuned in the simulation to be the kinds of cars that in real life you would use to drift.
Right.
And so it is easier to make them drift, but only if you understand the physics behind how drifting works, which is the thing they explain to you in the Drift Club, is how drifting works. And I found that, I needed to turn off traction control in order to actually get the drifts that I needed to get 3 stars. And once I did that, I started to understand then like how feathering the throttle and the emergency brake contributed to drifting, and using the pedal brake with the emergency brake and the throttle affects the physics and handling of the car. That's just like, it's so cool. And it leads you to understanding how driving simulation works on a deeper level. But the best part is that you could completely ignore all of that, leave all the assists on, get 1 star through the drift challenges, see them all, have fun. And the game doesn't make you feel like you're missing out because of it. It's not like it punishes you for not wanting to engage with it on a deeper level. If you just want to drive around and have fun, it's still good for that.
I don't know why this came to mind, but this kind of sounds like the Saints Row the Third of driving games for me. Like obviously it's not the same silly story and everything like that, but one of the things about Saints Row the Third is I did every side mission because like at some point I was so enthralled with the world and the attitude and everything in there that I was just like, yeah, I want to do all of this. And this sounds like the driving equivalent of that.
Totally. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
That seems like actually a really good comparison, because I did the same thing with Saints Row the Third 2, as well as Saints Row 4. And like, and now with Spider-Man, like if you make the act of traversal really fun, if you make the act of just doing various things around the world fun, then it'll make you compelled to actually do all the other stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And
Sorry, go ahead, please.
They do smart things too, like little things like the one of the big things in the Horizon series is the barn finds.
Yeah.
They're like old beat up cars that you find in a barn, and they give you the general location of them, and then you have to go find them. And it used to be that you just had to like, it could be that the barn is hidden in a copse of trees and you have to drive over there and squeeze your way through the trees to get to it or whatever. Now you have a drone that you get early on in the game. What you do when you get to the barn find spots is you pop the drone out, the drone flies around freely, you find the barn with the drone, and then you drive over to it. Like little things like that. You still get that sense of discovery and feeling, but they cut out the frustrating, irritating parts that it used to have of trying to maneuver a Nissan 350Z around a bunch of desert to try to find a barn. Now you just pop your drone out and go find it. So there's just a lot of smart stuff like that. And then none of that says anything about like all of the PvE and PvP stuff, the co-op stuff, the trials, which are like kind of like race car raids that change every week, and all of that live game stuff that there's different. The seasons really do give you a whole range of new experiences every time that they change. It's just so perfect in all kinds of ways. I don't know how they would. I almost wonder if Forza Horizon 5 is going to be a disappointment to a lot of people, because when that game finally happens, I don't know what they do to this to make it different other than set it in a new location. And I feel like people are going to expect some kind of reinvention of the series next time. And I don't know what they could do.
I think the next time we see a Forza Horizon game, it'll be on new consoles.
I agree.
So they'd have to change something up pretty drastically if they're going to a completely new platform. Though that being said, one of the, this is unrelated. It's related to Forza Horizon, but unrelated to Forza Horizon. I think Microsoft is doing the best thing in the industry right now by allowing you to have cross buy basically between your PC and your Xbox. Like I never owned an Xbox 360, and there's so many games I wanted to play, and I still don't own an Xbox One. But the fact that I can play all the games that I would want to have played from that platform on the PC is like the greatest thing.
It's so good too, as someone who bought, like I got the Xbox One X on their payment plan thing that they introduced, and I've been so happy with it because it's having the ability to plop down on the couch and play Forza in 4K is awesome. But then also, like when my partner wants to play a game on the TV, the fact that I can sit at my desk still and drop into Forza to do my dailies or whatever and play it there on PC is amazing. I've been doing a lot of playing back and forth between the systems, and it works. It's
I think Microsoft has totally nailed that.
Yep.
Oh, for sure. And I think doing that in addition to Game Pass is really great too, because I have a PC that's like not quite gaming PC, but kind of middling range. Like it has a dedicated graphics card. It's like the best laptop I could find for under $1,000. So like that's the level of, for most AAA games I tend to go console. So because it's kind of a crapshoot whether I'll prefer it on my PC or not. But with this, with Game Pass, it's just like, oh, I want to play Forza, I can give it a shot, and it might actually like make me think, maybe in the future I'd want to get an Xbox. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, but I think that that simultaneously is going to get people to try more games, which is cool.
It's kind of replacing the demo, but giving you the full game.
Right, yeah, for sure. So
the only thing I think that they could be doing better and push for even bigger is like, I am probably not going to play Odyssey for a little bit, but I am planning on trying to play it at some point this year. I'm playing Origins again right now because I never got through that game. It would be really cool if I could buy Odyssey on Xbox One X and be able to play it on PC as well, which they don't have that Play Anywhere stuff with third-party games yet. Yeah. And that would be really cool because like they do operate a store where you're buying games on PC. It would be nice if I could just, even if I couldn't get the game for free on PC, if I could at least transfer a save. Not that I necessarily would want to spend full price on both versions, but just some kind of interplay there so that I could know that like, oh, I'm buying it on Xbox, but if I ever want to play it on PC, I can carry my progress over would be nice.
Yeah, I agree. But maybe
so
that's
I'd like to see
maybe that is eventually something we will see. I mean,
I think it is. Yeah.
Within the past week, was it this week that Sony said, okay, fine, we'll do the crossplay?
Might have been a
was that
couple
this week or was that last week?
It was really recent though. Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
With that kind of stuff happening, I could see Origin and Uplay and those kind of services being like, yeah, if you own it on our service, then sure, you can access it on this device.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I have to imagine that you're going to see pushes from people like Rockstar to allow cross-platform play and stuff like GTA or GTA Online and Red Dead Online more, which is more relevant right now.
Yeah. I'd be interested in seeing if Blops lets you do it.
Yeah, I don't see why you. I mean, that seems like a big one to like you would want to be able to do that. I think that's sort of the future, and I think that Microsoft recognizes it in a way that is pretty encouraging, and hopefully they'll be leading the charge there. I would love to see them work to emulate more backwards compatible games on the PC through Windows.
Sure.
I think that would be a really cool thing to see. I think there's room for them to move still. I don't think they're necessarily done, but I think that the service as it stands is really good. Game Pass is really good and worth it, especially when you factor in that you can buy it in chunks of time. It's not necessarily just a 14-day or $14 a month subscription. You can go and just buy a year of it, and then that's only the cost of like a couple of games to buy it for a year, and then you have access to all that stuff.
Yep. And if just so you know, if you go to cdkeys.com, I think, not sponsored, you can get a month of it for like $2.
Wow, yeah, that's cool.
Like, so it's like almost nothing.
Yeah.
Anyways, how's Assassin's Creed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that was a good segue.
Oh, the last thing I'll say, people should also check out Heath Signature was on sale. I think it may or may not be still on sale. I played some of that. That's really good. But and Assassin's Creed Origins is good, but we can talk about that after we talk about Odyssey.
Yeah, Heath Signature is good.
I thought we were transitioning over to Origins, not Odyssey. I guess the thing of us all playing Assassin's Creed now.
Yeah, I mean, Origins is good. I can say that I'm replaying it. I said in the pre-show, like the combat isn't as grabbing me really this time out. I'm having a really hard time. I can't time countering for the life of me. I can't seem to like, and I've played every single Assassin's Creed game, so like I've been around this block a lot, and Origins totally changed the combat system, but I've done their counter timing forever, and I can't. Even in the tutorial, it took me like 4 tries to try to actually counter something. And I really don't like the way that the camera moves around in combat in Origins. It's just bad. But otherwise, the game is gorgeous still, and the characters are super likable. And I'm not really any farther in the story than I got before, but the story is very, very good and very well told. So, yeah. Environment design is really cool too. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Odyssey.
Yeah, me
Allison.
too. I remember the first thing you said in our group chat, Allison, was it's friggin' enormous.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I think a lot of people with Odyssey that a lot of people have been talking about as both a positive and a negative is just how big the game is. And I thought people said, okay, yeah, like I assumed this is going to be a large game. So I pulled up the map and I thought, yeah, that looks pretty big. And then I realized I still had a ways to zoom out. I was like, holy shit, this game's big. And even then I still had ways to scroll on the map, so I was really only looking at like maybe a third of it. So it's very, very, very big. That said, I actually think that the scope of it makes a whole lot of sense, especially since this game really seems to be going for the kind of Greek epic in the vein of the Odyssey. You kind of want this game to be big, because I'm not super far yet. I've only played a few hours of it so far, but pretty early on. They were already name dropping Odysseus. They were talking about the Odyssey, like going
the
over
Iliad?
some of the going
Cool.
over some of the stories of like specifically in the Odyssey, like Metacyclops went to like Scylla like it's really like, so I feel like the scale of it makes a whole lot of sense. But I feel like if you're going to play the game, you know that you're getting into kind of a big experience. But so far I'm really liking it. It did take a little bit for it to really click for me, and I think a part of that is because it does take while for the story to kind of the first big story hook to really kick in. Like when it took a couple of hours actually for the first real thing in the story for me to go, oh shit, I need to play this more. Like, which is granted, that's in terms of how long this game is going to be, that's not very much, but it is hard to tell people, hey, like once you play a couple hours of it, it will grab you. But I think that in general, it's feeling really fun to play. It feels like a very like the I feel like I already said this with Spider-Man, whereas I feel like Spider-Man was the like kind of culmination of a lot of open world things. I feel like Assassin's Creed Odyssey is in a way too, just maybe with a different scale, just because of how big it is and how like all of the mechanics work. But like Pat said, I'm not really getting as into the combat. I've heard it's pretty similar to the combat in Origins, but I never actually played Origins, so who can say? But it's coming off of Spider-Man and dipping back into God of War, which I still need to finish. It's not quite there, but I think it mostly is trying to encourage you to be stealthy, or at least wants to. And again, I don't know if I quite like it as much as Spider-Man stealth, but that's because Spider-Man stealth has, your superhero abilities, which you definitely don't have here. So it makes sense, but at the same time, I'm like, it'd be so nice if I could just web zip over there and use my webs, and then it makes me want to play Spider-Man again. But I'm legitimately really interested in getting to more of the story, and getting kind of more out into the open world. The big boat recently, and it's very fun to do that because naval combat is back, and I have a weird weakness for sailing in video games, so I'm just like, I'm on the open water and I'm in a boat, and that makes me really excited. I'm playing as Cassandra, who's the female protagonist, and she is so cool.
Yeah.
I love her so much.
It's Cassandra or Alexios, right?
Right. And since I'm still really early on, it's going to be interesting to see where that story goes. But both Cassandra and Alexios are characters within the game. But okay. So I don't know where it's going to go, but it's going to be interesting to see. But Cassandra is really fun, and she has a really cool personality, but now that there's dialogue choices, you can kind of make her more of the whatever personality you want to. So I've been trying to go for a lot of the more kind of snarky responses whenever I can find them. The
renegade options.
So not quite renegade. Like I wouldn't say that. Like there are definitely choices that you can make, but I don't know if they're necessarily that same level of Paragon or Renegade.
Sure.
There's no meter in the game for that, which is probably for the best. But it's fun, kind of make her that kind of personality you want. And in general, the game so far has a lot of personality. Like you start out on an island that is basically you've been living for quite some time, so you pretty much, it's a small island, so you pretty much know everybody, and there's just this real sense of lived-in randomness with the people, where you run into people and you're like, oh, hey, it's you. And there's just a really big sense of personality from this game, which I don't know if I've always gotten from like all the characters in Assassin's Creed. Like there's definitely personalities there, and there's definitely characters that I've really loved, but I don't know if it's quite to the same level of the way that I felt with Cassandra so far. So that's been nifty. The other thing that's kind of cool is the game has what is basically the Nemesis system. It's not quite the same as the Nemesis system in the Shadow of Mordor games, but it basically, there are these kind of big enemies that pop up that are basically mercenaries out to kill you. And so you can kind of already see in the menu, there's these tiers of powerful mercenaries that are out. If you have a bounty on your head, they'll be kind of constantly after you. So pretty early on in the game, there's a bounty on your head that you can only get rid of with killing the bounty hunter. But from what I understand, you can also pay off your bounty later in the game. So you can kind of decide how much of that you want. But once that bounty's on your head, you have to kind of either avoid person, and they all have their own specific weaknesses and things like that. So it's not quite, I don't know if it's quite the same level as that Nemesis system, but it is pretty cool. So you can see, oh, there's this guy who has a reputation, so you know these couple of things about how to more easily beat him. But they can be pretty tough, and it starts one where it's level 5, and I don't know if there's any way that you can beat it before you hit level 5. It would be pretty significantly difficult. So like I tried, and he immediately like killed me within 2 hits when I was trying with level 3 or something. So it is definitely a challenge, but it was kind of a fun battle. So it's it feels like there's a lot. Like I said, I'm only maybe 4 or 5 hours into it because I just played some earlier today and a little bit yesterday. But I think it's a really nifty game, and I'm excited to see where this game goes because it feels kind of like that. Like I said, just kind of that culmination of a lot of open world adventure game running around. Mm. So it's a cool game.
Yeah, from an outsider looking in, like knowing that it is that enormous and kind of, I guess, ambitious. Like I don't know how they do another Assassin's Creed game next year.
Next year they're taking a break.
They've announced that already?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because it already feels like they've inundated their own market by having this come out directly after Origins.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see how it does with considering how big Origins was. I certainly wouldn't, like I've seen people say, like Pat, you're still working on Origins and you don't necessarily want to buy it right away, which is totally understandable. If I'd played Origins earlier this year, I probably would go, well, I don't know if I need Odyssey, but I think they're trying to, from what it seems like they're not making it as much of a yearly game anymore, which is probably for the best with Definitely. Things at this scale.
Yeah, I mean, Origins is also a massive game. I think that Odyssey sounds like it's bigger, but Origins was huge. I mean, it's especially when you factor in the DLCs that came out for it, it's really, really big. So I would hope that they would let this game breathe some. It sounds like the kind of thing that really they need to give people time to play it. And
right.
I don't know where the series would go next. I think there's still a lot of options. I personally imagine they'll probably set one in Japan. I know they've said numerous times they're not going to do that, but there's direct references to Japan in Odyssey that seem to indicate that, and that's how they've always teased the next location in previous games. Like in Syndicate, there's a character that in the DLC you help him get on a boat to Egypt, which was like the teaser for it to be Egypt. There's like there's notes about pirate gold in Assassin's Creed 3. In Assassin's Creed 2, I believe there was some, not in 2, but in either Brotherhood or Revelations, there was a nod to the Revolution at some point. So they always tease the next location, and I know there's direct references to Japan in Odyssey, so I would imagine that will be their next target. But I would hope that that's the Origins team and that it takes a little bit longer. I think it's also, I would totally be on board for these teams. I understand that Odyssey has maybe been a little bit more divisive than Origins in terms of people liking it, but Origins is like super fucking grim and heavy in a way that so like I've played every game in the series. 3 is my least favorite, far and away. I think it's awesome that they featured a Native American protagonist, and I think that the actor that portrays him does a really good job of portraying him. I just think that game suffers because he's so angry all the time.
Did they ever make reference to like Connor or Ezio or anybody like that in these newer games?
So they absolutely do in 4. 4 you're playing as Edward Kenway, who Connor is Connor Kenway. Connor's dad was Haytham.
Gotcha.
Haytham is Edward's son. I can't remember for sure how they're related, but they're related. Yeah. Assassin's Creed Rogue, which is a fucking fantastic game that people should play. It is the best game in the series before Origins, or at least before Syndicate.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, I'm gonna rep Syndicate here. I love Syndicate.
I think having played all of those games last year, I think I like Rogue more than Syndicate, but it's enough that I would allow for some just like preference there in terms of like the setting. But Rogue is awesome. In Rogue, you play as a Templar that is directly related to Haytham. Haytham Kenway is like the Templar master that inducts you. And then in Syndicate, I don't think there are direct ties. In Unity is tied into both Rogue and Assassin's Creed 4 as well. Unity is also just fine now. They fixed all the problems with it. Syndicate is where I think they started to break a little bit from the characters being directly related to each other. Syndicate is also the first time that I think that in the meta story, you're not playing as one of Desmond's relatives that he's somehow related to. I believe Jacob and Evie are totally like they're from like somebody else's DNA line that they don't really go into who they're from. And in Origins, as far as I know, Altair might get referenced at some point, but they still reference the past characters and Desmond in the Out of Animus stuff. But like, I don't believe Bayek is related to those characters at all. I guess he could be related to Altair, but yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it would be a big surprise if Cassandra and Alexios are in any way related, because I don't want to necessarily spoil things, but the DNA is definitely not gotten from Desmond.
No. However, and I don't want spoilers either, so you are free to hand wave me. But I will say that Greek and Egyptian cultures were pretty intermingled.
Right.
And it's during actually Origins takes place at the time that is kind of beginning to occur. Caesar is in that game. One of the Caesars is in that game, who is Roman, but still, like, at that point, it was Hellenistic Egypt. Like, Greek and Roman cultures were mingling with Egyptian culture. And you see that in Origins some. So I wouldn't be surprised, because Odyssey takes place before Origins, if those characters are somehow tied to, even if they're not related to, Bayek. But either way, my original point was that like Connor is so grim, and I think his story is written to be almost too dark. Like it's hard to play, kind of. Not because it's upsetting, but because it's like hard to take seriously, because the stuff that happens to him is so just continues to go bad and worse, you're at a certain point, you're like, dude, just fucking leave. Like, these people all suck. All of them around you are terrible. And so by contrast, like, Origins is very dark. Bayek's motivations for being the character that he is are pretty much as strong as you could get. The stuff that happens to him in the early parts of that game that they reveal are just devastating, but it's portrayed so well, and he still is a character who has moments of brevity too that are fun. So the point being, hearing that Odyssey is kind of more fun and less heavy overall, I think these two teams doing a super serious followed by a more fun kind of, goofy's the wrong word, but just lighter hearted game would be pretty cool going forward.
Yeah, the story itself is like, like I said, I'm not very far into it, so it's hard to say where it's going to go. But there is the moments of seriousness. There are serious moments, and there are moments that are dark. However, I feel like playing as Cassandra, she feels like a very light character. So even if there are serious storylines, it's not represented fully. I mean, it's not affecting the entire game.
And that's kind of what I'm
like.
That's kind of what I'm saying, is like the tone of the character less than the story not being serious.
Right. Right. I think that's true. And I think that's part of why I'm liking this game so much, and I'm willing to sit through it. It's like, well, I don't like, it took a while for things to kind of kick off, but Cassandra's really cool. And so I'm willing to kind of see where this goes. Whereas I don't know if I necessarily do that with a character that was more self-serious. It's hard to say, but yeah, I'm really interested in seeing where this game goes and then where the series goes as a whole, especially since they've kind of gone off the rails in terms of characters and connecting it to things. So
I will say that this is kind of more of a, from what I've seen of Odyssey, it has this same sort of thing that's sort of been the case with kind of every game in the series, I guess. And it's a hard thing to convey, but like when you play like Red Dead, for example, or even God of War is another example, even though it's not like same kind of open world, there's like a weightiness to the feel of the characters and the feel of the combat that is very, I don't know how to put it. In Assassin's Creed, though, it always feels like, I guess it's a certain degree of jank of like, when I'm like swinging my sword at an enemy and they back up, they end up like with one foot on a ledge and the other foot just floating in the air until you hit them enough that they like fall off and they kind of like glitch through the ledge and hit the ground. It just feels like very like, everything feels like you're not connected to the world physically in terms of controls. Like the characters are like skating across the environments in a way that you don't get with other AAA like open worldy like action RPG kind of games. And I hope that they solve that problem as they move forward, because it's the thing that I'm struggling the most with in the combat and just like in being taken out of the experience in Origins right now, that has always been a thing in the series, but as other aspects of the production value continue to improve, that part of it is a little bit, it feels like they're working with an engine that has had stuff bolted onto it for years and years and years, which is exactly what's happened. So
yeah, unless you guys have any other questions, I have a couple of other games that I played this weekend. Since we have a smaller cast, I might.
Yeah, do it.
I'm gonna use this
go for it.
this time to bring them up because I only just got Odyssey yesterday. So there are two games that I've been playing a lot of this week. First is The Messenger, which I'm really enjoying. The only issue that I have with it is I don't know if you guys have played it yet, but there's the checkpoint revival system where basically there's a character that helps you at the brink of death in exchange for taking some of your currency the next time that you go through. So it's a really reasonable system. The only thing that's kind of annoying about that is that the character kind of makes a jokey insult at you every time it does it. And granted, it's not terrible, but at the same time, like, I was having a bit of a hard week, and so I was like, I don't know if I necessarily need this. It feels like it's actively kind of making you not want to play the game in a weird way. And I feel like the rest of the game is really solid. It gives me kind of I haven't quite gotten to the big gameplay change yet, but I think I'm almost there. But the gameplay feels really fun, and it kind of gives me that Shovel Knight vibes of having that retro feel, but being so well polished and fun, and have the kind of perfect level of difficulty so that I'm really enjoying playing it. That's just the thing where I'm like, you know, it'd be nice if you weren't actively trying to make me turn off the game. But everything else about the game really works. So I'm excited to get more into it and hopefully beat it before the end of the year. But the other game that I've been playing, and I feel like is the polar opposite in that it's extremely inviting and wants you to play it, is the game Wander Song. I don't know if you guys have heard of it yet.
Wander Song, no. Mm-mm.
I'm playing it on Switch, but I know that it's also on PC because it was published by Humble. But it's the single cutest game in the world. I've seen it compared to both Night in the Woods and Paper Mario, but more so like gameplay Night in the Woods-esque, where you're playing as a bard, where you go around helping people through the power of song. So you literally, the right thumbstick on your controller is controlling the pitch. So there's 8 separate directions, and each direction is a separate note. So you can affect either the environment that way. Like, for example, you might see the wind and you can kind of move it around with your voice, or you can sometimes play specific things that people sing at you and you play it back. So it's not in a difficult game in any means. It's not a game that wants to have you lose it. It's more of kind of a casual thing, but it is such a warm and friendly type of game that it's really sweet. The music is really good, as you'd hope from a game that's music focused, and the design of it is the cutest thing in the world. So it's just endlessly charming. I love being able to play as a bard, just singing at everybody, and it's just kind of the sweetest game I might have ever played. So I definitely recommend it if you have some extra money lying around and have a Switch or a PC and want to play something real cute. So Wander Song is very, very good. All right. Does anybody else have anything to add, or are we going to be wrapping this thing up?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I don't think I have too much more to add. I will say...
You turned into a robot.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, sorry.
It's awesome.
Oh, great. Well, then I definitely don't have anything more to say.
That's cool.
Wow. Robo Pat, I love it. Robo Best Boy.
Yeah, I'll see if I can do it in the future. I saw some tapes this week, some game tapes, where there was some robot voice happening on the original Xbox Live. Y'all should go watch the most recent game tapes at giantbomb.com because it's very good.
I love this. We need to find a way to make this happen every week.
It's not hard. I can make it happen every week. I just need the right voice changer.
Oh, okay.
This is not on purpose. I didn't do this. but I could.
No, but you are going to get a voice changer, though.
Fantastic.
Yes.
I look forward to like
right.
the Crystal Maiden style lady voice you'll have next week.
All right, so let's just find where people can find us this week. So, Alex, where can people find you?
I don't know. Google.
Fair. You know what? I'll take it. Pat.
You can find me on my recharging station.
Do you connect to Skylanders?
No,
Yes.
but I can tell you the weather and charge your phone too.
Oh, cool. That's good. You can find me on Twitter at WRITERSERENYTY. And you can find me on Twitch at Happy Beeps here. And I haven't really streamed much this week, but I'm hopefully going to be doing it soon. I've had a week, so but we'll see when I get back to streaming stuff. And also you can find us at Fix Podcasts on Facebook and on at fix.space for websites. All right, so I
favorite
think
podcasting apps.
exactly.
Except
And
Stitcher. I think we're on Stitcher.
are we? Oh, you can also find us on the American Psychological Association .com and
On their website.
on their website there'll be a link to Gaming Fix as proven therapy. So get on that. So I think that's gonna do it for this week. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.